Today, we're jumping into a story that honestly sounds like it's straight out of a political thriller. It's about a direct, high stakes power struggle between two of the most powerful institutions in the US. We're talking Congress versus the Supreme Court. And really, it all boils down to this one huge question. Can the legislative branch, can Congress, look at a decision from the highest court in the land and just say, nope, we don't agree, do it over? It sounds kind of impossible, right? But believe me, it happened. Okay, so let's get into it. To really understand this fight, we first have to get a handle on the rule change that kicked the whole thing off. See, for decades, the legal rules for religious freedom were pretty stable, pretty clear. And then, all of a sudden, they weren't. For a long, long time, American law used something called the compelling interest test. Now, think of it as a really, really high bar for the government to clear. If a law was going to interfere with your religious freedom, the government had to prove it had an absolutely essential, can't do without it reason. It was basically a powerful shield for religious liberty. But then, in 1990, the ground just completely shifted. Before then, you had that strong protection from the compelling interest test, but a Supreme Court case, Employment Division v. Smith, came along and just turned everything upside down, creating a brand new and much, much weaker standard. And the change was, well, it was dramatic. Before the Smith decision, religious practice had that strong shield. But afterward, the court pretty much said that as long as a law is neutral and applies to everybody, it doesn't really matter if it burdens your religion. Just like that, the shield was gone. So the Supreme Court had spoken. Case closed, right? Well, not even close. Washington, D.C. was not about to just let this decision stand. What happened next was a political reaction so fast and so unified, it's actually kind of hard to believe today. I mean, think about how divided politics can be. Well, the Smith decision managed to do the impossible. It brought everyone together, not in celebration, but in shared outrage. And that is not an exaggeration. This wasn't a partisan thing at all. Liberals, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, they all felt the court had gone way too far and had just ripped away a fundamental protection. So how unified are we talking? Well, the law Congress passed to fight the court's decision got 0 no votes, not 1. It passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate. That almost never happens in Washington. And this was the law they passed, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRF for short. The name really says it all, doesn't it? The goal here wasn't just to make a few tweaks. This was a direct attempt by Congress to restore the very standard the Supreme Court had just tossed in the trash. And yeah, Congress was not being subtle about it. The text of the law flat out said its purpose was to restore the compelling interest test. They were basically writing a command to the entire judicial system, saying, that new rule from the Supreme Court in Smith, ignore it, you will use the old rule because we, the Congress, say so. So you've got this massive constitutional power struggle brewing in Washington, but it would all finally come to a head in a small, historic town in Texas, all because of a local zoning dispute. On one side of the fight, you've got St. Peter Catholic Church. It was a thriving parish that had just, outgrown its historic building. They needed more space for their congregation. Simple as that. And on the other side, the city of Boerne, Texas. And they had a law, a historic preservation ordinance, designed to protect the unique character of their town. So the church wants to expand. The city says no, pointing to its historic preservation rules. But the archbishop sued, and his argument took this from a simple zoning issue to a national showdown. He claimed that under RFRA, that law Congress just passed, the city had to let the church expand because, he argued, historic preservation wasn't a compelling interest. And just like that, this local fight over a building permit wasn't local anymore. It became the ultimate test case. The lawsuit worked its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, forcing this final, epic confrontation. And this was the question the justices were now staring down. Who gets to decide what the Constitution actually means? Is it Congress passing laws to protect citizens' rights? Or is it the court itself, which had interpreted that freedom in a totally different way? You had these two competing claims to power. On one side, Congress is arguing, hey, we have the authority under the Constitution to pass laws that protect people's rights. But on the other side, you have the court's traditional position, which is basically, hold on, it's our job and our job alone to interpret the Constitution and say what the law is. So, the case of this little church in Boerne, Texas, forced an answer to one of the deepest, most challenging questions in American government. When two co-equal branches are in direct conflict over what the Constitution itself means, whose vision wins? That's what was really at stake.